Rebel. Reject. Create.
Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of the Rebel, Reject, Create podcast. And today, my victim is Salmaan Sana, who is a leadership consultant with a specific focus on changing company culture, transforming frustrations, and increasing action around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome on the show, Sana. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation, and yeah, it's good to be in a conversation with each other. Anyways, I feel like every time we have a talk, then we're either inspiring each other or kind of finding ways to support and help each other. So I'm glad that I can just be a part of the show as well. So yeah, thanks for the invite.
Cool. It's good to have you here. Now, what that brief introduction doesn't really do is also explain that, you're a problem solver and you're a public speaker, and basically you're an all-round kind of creative guy. Did you always think of yourself like that, or do you even now think of yourself as creative?
So I think, remember when you said, "Hey, would you like to come on my podcast?" And then you said it's about people that are being creative. I have a I have a certain image of people that are creative, and I thought, I don't know if I fall into that category. I know there's a good friend of mine who works at the same co-working space as me. He's creative. He's got A3 pieces of paper, and he's drawing and mapping logos and stuff like that. Like, that's creative. Although if I give it a little bit more thought, like what is the concept of being creative? I'm not going to get too philosophical here. I do think before I go on a tangent, I do feel like when I have to find solutions for companies, organizations, teams that I'm working with, then I often have to find ways to be creative in a very limited circumstance. So it reminds me of a beautiful constraint, that you have a lot of constraints and then you have to find all these creative solutions within constraints. I love being in a situation like that. Weirdly enough, I thrive in them too. So give me a limited budget, give me a limited amount of time, and then then we have to figure something out throughout those circumstances, and that's both for my private life but also definitely for my work life as well. So it's I think we are constantly being constrained. Pandemic was a beautiful example of being a big constraint and how to work through it as well. So yeah, I guess I'm creative in that aspect.
Well, I think you've touched on something that's really important that I don't think I've talked to anybody else about on this podcast before. This idea of limitations and constraints being a stimulus to creativity. I think the myth is that it's a barrier. Oh, I don't have the right budget, or I don't have the right people. But you're saying completely the opposite. Why?
If I didn't know it logically because of myself and the examples that I've been through, there's also a really cool book called Beautiful Constraint. I don't know, I have it somewhere probably nearby, but maybe not the time for me to go looking for it. The thing is, I see it as when you have a constraint, whether it's budget, whether it's resources, whether it's people, and you're able to come together as a group of people or as an individual, gather yourself then and say, okay, this is what my limitations are. What is possible? And I think at that moment is when it's essential to look at what is my circle of influence? What are the things that I could do within these circumstances? And that's why I refer to things like the pandemic as a time that we couldn't do much, but then we only had certain limited ways of communicating with each other or being able to do things. So anytime you're in a restrained situation, the question always, I think, should be, what is possible? And what can I have an influence on? And usually when I'm working with a company or team or a board of directors, they're like, yeah, but we need to figure something out. We need to figure out a way through these bigger challenges. What usually helps most of the time as well, if it's disseminated properly, is, okay, if you give everyone responsibility and get everybody, well, as many people as possible, to see how much influence they have on the situation, and then to come up with creative ideas to make a positive change, whether it's a company culture, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, whether it's the leadership, whether it's becoming more sustainable, then you'll notice people come up with these amazing ideas. Like, there's a great example that I just heard from a friend of mine working with a company too, and it's about how do you get people on the sustainability agenda. And if you ask like the entire, if you go through the entire supply chain and you say, what if everybody took responsibility for making like a 1% positive change on the environment, like a little less packaging, a little less that, a little less that. If you count all that up in the entire supply chain, before you know it, you've actually created a much, much bigger positive change. So I
Yeah,
see I'm blurred out a little bit.
yeah, yeah. You've
Whoa.
confused the camera with your enthusiasm.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Now that's Kaizen, right? That's the theory of incremental gains.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Today,
It
just
is.
make one thing a little bit better and keep on doing that, and then in the end you end up with a lot of better things.
Yeah, true,
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
You're gonna have to put your
yeah.
face in your camera again and
Yeah, I was
go
like,
away.
is it focusing? Feels weird to sit up like this. Let me see if my camera, if I could zoom. There we go. See,
That's
I'm
better.
back. Yeah.
All right. I'll cut that bit out.
That's fine.
Okay. I'm gonna kick off again. So could I paraphrase that as saying that what's really important is just to start?
Um, well, I would say yes and no. I think it is yes, start, but I think it's about how you start. Um, I'm I'm somebody who very much thinks that, yeah, I'm just trying to think of a good way to explain this. Starting is good, but starting needs a bit of a basis. So it's about where am I starting from? And I also like one of the topics that you just mentioned in my intro is which is transforming frustrations.
Hmm.
If you start and you're angry, you're gonna kind of start hitting a wall. But the first thing I think often is to do to accept the situation as it is. Uh, there's that what within the AA they have the 12 steps, and then within the 12 one of the 12 steps is to learn to recite the Serenity Prayer, and the Serenity Prayer is wow, getting a bit of a mind blank, which is grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
So you're constantly asking every time you're in a difficult situation, what can I change? What can't I and can I accept? And the wisdom between the two. And I feel like the first thing we need to do in every situation is accept the circumstances as they are. Like really, to a deeper level of acceptance. Because what we often do is we're so prone to want to solve things straight away. If you were to tell me a problem right now, my innate wish would be to try to help you and to come up with solutions. When that might not be the thing that would help you more than it would be to help accept the situation as it is. I think
Hmm.
there's even a famous like therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is can we be okay with our negative emotions? And we've been taught not to be okay with them. And I think that's where we need to start is to accept what am I feeling? What am I going through? What is the situation I'm in? And from there to say, am I allowed to be with whatever emotion that's taking place here? Is it joy, anger, upset, frustration? Can I be there? And then from there comes the next step, say, okay, how can I use or transform that? Because otherwise you're being reactive. You're, problem, bang, solution, which can be work. I'm not saying that it can't.
Yeah.
I think it gives a little bit of that space, to be able to think, to be able to be a little bit more thought out, and also to be able to be to a certain extent connected to what you're actually emotionally feeling at that moment.
Wow. Now you've really got me thinking here, because you know the whole idea of being creative evokes quite a lot of resistance in a large percentage of people, Be- because I guess similarly it's kind of been trained out of us, we or shamed out of us quite often. And so this whole idea that you could actually um, create anything or change
Yeah,
anything by creating something is quite
yeah.
a daunting idea for a lot of people. So this idea that you need to just accept where you are right now and therefore be able to look around you and use what you have to hand right now, I think is quite powerful, because everyone's always thinking, oh, well, I'm not Picasso or I'm not Bill Gates, so I can't possibly do that.
I think my thoughts on that would be any and every time that I've been even remotely creative, every time I've had to go through this kind of, I don't know, this weird valley of death, like just this, I had to feel horrible about myself. So whether it was a talk that I need to give, whether it was a workshop that I'm creating, whether it's a entire strategy that I need to help set up, every time I'd be mapping it out. And then I had to go through this, they call it, there's this horrible phase of, I'm all my ideas are just bullshit. I can't do this. This is all crap. They're all gonna see through me. I'm an imposter, or whatever it may be. All of that, and I need to get through that phase. It's just grueling every time. But I don't know. I hope many people don't have this, but I do definitely have it. And every time I'm in that phase, I know I need to stick through it, which just sucks every time. But I know, like, if I use, so what I usually try to do is when I'm brainstorming, I mind map a lot. So I have an A4, blank pieces of paper, on a notepad, and I'm just mapping things out and just drawing things out. And at a certain point, there's a moment that things just start to kind of click, or a theory use as you get to the source. Or I think John Cleese has a beautiful video online about creativity where he says, like, when you get into this, the open modus, he calls it. And I think, when he wrote Monty Python, he said I had to get into it, like, I think he calls it 90 minutes. 90 minutes that it took him to get into the open modus and have like creative ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's not that I use the exact same amount of time, but I know that I need a good sample of time, say 45 minutes, just mapping and writing and drawing and not checking things like my messages or all that stuff, and just with the idea. And then then something bubbles up. But I do need to go through that really, really, really shitty phase.
Yeah.
and I feel that's where it is, though. That's where it is. And it's
No,
like almost a, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
that makes perfect sense. Because I think what happens when we're trying to be creative is that our first attempts is the low-hanging fruit. It's the obvious. It's the cliche. It's everything that's been done before. And I think that's where the self-loathing comes in. You're just like, oh, this is just. And only when you stick with it and push through it and just keep on keeping on, do you stand a chance of popping out the other side.
Yeah.
I mean, I see
So,
this in brainstorms. I like to do a timed
yeah.
brainstorm where I say to everyone, okay, you got 2 minutes and you just got to spit out like alternative uses for a brick, for example. And the first 15 or 20 uses, it's pretty much always the same. It's
Yeah.
only in the last 10 seconds that suddenly interesting stuff starts to come out when everyone's finally going, okay, everything's been said. Geez, what else can we think of? And then I say, okay, that's great. Let's look at the list. I say, right, we're going again for another 30 seconds. And then it starts to happen.
Mm. Oh, that's brilliant. And that makes a lot of sense as well, because I think it feels like there's a lot too much programming already been done that everyone just does the exact same things. And to get to this place where you're like, okay, but what if everything was possible with the brick? What if the brick was made of different material? What if it just, like, was from outer space? Or what it was just what if you could think in 5 dimensions? Then suddenly, that's, then you get to a whole different phase. And that I think they've done this experiment with kids, and kids always come up with much more creative, cool ideas, and
Right.
adults just become super boring, just the same 10 or 20 things that we all think of.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're
Yeah.
so keen to follow the rules, and all the rules do is give you more of what you already have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, true.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good point.
Okay,
And
so
do you
that's,
notice, I'm just curious, do you notice that when you do such exercises that people become more aware of the fact that they're not creative, or they could be more creative?
I think everyone's always a bit shocked at the fact that the good ideas come later,
Mm.
that they're kind of
Yeah.
like, oh, wait a second. So this means that if I just persisted a little bit more, I could maybe actually get to some gold here. Yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned kids there.
Yeah.
So why do you think that kids, given any topic to just spitball with, will typically come up with way more creative answers than adults?
Yeah. I think I have to refer to Sir Ken Robinson's like iconic TED Talk, school kills creativity, or something like that.
Yeah.
And what he says is that we're educating our kids out of creativity, because what we're trying to do is get everyone to conform to a certain way of thinking and doing. whether it's algebra, mathematics, physics, chemistry. You literally just are not asked, be super creative and come up with different ways of expressing yourself, whether it's dance, art, music, all kind of ways of expressing yourself. And I think kids are still not yet 100% formed at this moment. So when you ask them a question, they're still able to kind of think unbound. While I, at this particular age and phase of my life, I'm very bound. So it feels like I'm just like cranking something open. It's like rusty, like, try to think a little bit broader. And if I just ask a kid goes, no, we drew ideas, we drew that. And they've got this very, amazingly open mind of how to look at things. The kids, at least that I know, as in whether it's cousins or whether it's friends, kids, I just see how they look and how they see an entire world in front of them just with toys. They're just creating. If I were to go like, oh wow, this pen is a plane, I really feel stupid doing it. While a kid just really sees a plane, and we think, oh, that's them being kids. No, they're actually just using their imagination, and we as adults apparently just become way too goddamn serious to say, I can't see a plane if I'm just using a pen. That's the interesting part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because if you look at the world, I mean, we're now in, the ideas age. Everything that's got massive market value at the moment is underpinned by an idea, a piece of intellectual property. I mean, look at Google, look at social media platforms. It's like, it's just an idea, and now it's worth billions. So what's going on with this whole thing that we're so dismissive of this whole idea of coming up with ideas and using our imagination when fundamentally our global economy is underpinned by ideas?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, from a leadership perspective, if you think about your work with leaders in consulting.
Yeah. So what comes to my mind is that I feel like we're often paralyzed by the fact that we feel like we can't come up with good ideas. I don't think at this point of phase anybody's ever going to write anything original. I think everything that's being written now, whatever it's blog posts, books, whatever, I know that it's some form of regurgitation of a whole bunch of different other sources. I would be very surprised. Also, when it comes to music, I would be very surprised if a very original piece comes out that it's like never, like not sourced from anywhere, not inspired by anything else, just like an original person, literally somebody stepping out of a cave, picking up a piano and going like, blah, 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 and then just like coming out with a tune. You're like, wow, we've never heard a tune like that. So we're paralyzed by the fact that there's so much already being created and ideas being created. I think where we go, where we can win something, and I think this is when it comes to working with leaders, is it could have been created, it could have been thought of, but what's your way of doing it? And that counts just as well as for me as for you, David. When the work that I'm doing, the stuff that I talk about, that I help companies with, or teams with, or organizations with, or the things that I'm doing within TEDx Amsterdam, it's not rocket science. It's not like you don't know about it. I'm not going to come and tell you something that you definitely do not know. I think that what changes is the way I do it, and my way, my format, my the process that I put in mind, or my personality that I put in there. But the content itself isn't so much different. And I feel like if everyone can personalize it for themselves, they say, okay, but what is my way of doing this? Then, and letting go of the whole original idea thing, I think then you become creative because you're doing it your own way, and then you give everything a certain different flavor. The way you tackle creativity is your way, which gives it, and that's what I feel that makes it so unique. Creativity in itself isn't something unique. I know a whole bunch of people that are speaking about the event, not, but the fact that you are doing it your way, that's what makes it so remarkable. And the way that I do that, I mean, the amount of diversity, equity, and inclusion, consultants, officers, it's like they're like they're popping up like mushrooms, which is great because it's needed in this time. And I did have a certain moment that I thought, oh, well, am I coming into an oversaturated market of these people? And then I thought, well, no, I'm just going to do it my way. And I hope and I wish all those people as much success as possible, because this is something that needs to change. So, and there's plenty that needs to change. So I'm hoping that we can look at it in the form of an abundance. And from there to say, all right, what are my own creative unique ideas that I can bring forward. And I hope that's what I try to at least inspire other leaders to do the same. Just how would you do it? What's your way? And then you'll just notice, oh yeah, this is my way of doing it, and yeah, and I'm hoping that I can inspire others to do the same.
That's brilliant. Salmaan, we've had a fantastic conversation, and 20 minutes has kind of flown by. What would be your final message to anybody in this space? I mean, for me, diversity and therefore inclusion is one of the key things for the future. Otherwise, we're going to end up in this homogenous, gray, boring hellhole where all too many people are excluded.
Yeah.
What is your takeaway when you start thinking about leadership, the future, intellectual property, and diversity?
Yeah, I understand that you brought those three topics together. I'm trying to figure out, I see them very separately. Well, not very separately, but I would tackle them a little differently, although they are connected. When it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, I think one of the more important things that we need to do is one, actually have open conversations with each other about it. I mean, we can do implicit bias tests. We can do a whole bunch of other things about seeing which people are more privileged and less, and racial backgrounds. But I think what's more important is that we actually figure out ways to have conversations to say what would help create a more inclusive, collaborative working environment within a team or organization. But a question that I often ask is like, when have you ever felt excluded? But even more so, when have you excluded someone in your life, whether it's personal, private, or whether it's work life? And I know I've definitely excluded people, whether
Mm.
consciously or unconsciously, definitely excluded people. Once we can become honest about conversations like that, I think things start to change. And I know I've definitely been excluded as well, being my parents being migrants coming here to the Netherlands, and me also having to deal with racism at times.
Yeah.
And I don't want to compare myself or make it a sob story. People have experienced much worse than I have. I do feel it's good for us to be honest about what has happened.
Yeah.
When it comes to leadership and intellectual property, I think what our biggest point there is that we get like I said earlier, paralyzed by the fact that we're worried what has already been created. And I feel that people need to actually, then I would say what you earlier said, which is we need to just go for it and try it out. But I think we also need to be okay with the fact that we're scared, or that we're not sure, or what if. And I think to go beyond that. So I think the whole startup mentality, what you often have is, which is try and fail and see how it goes. But what helps me is to have people around me as well that remind me, support me, because I'm like my worst critic. I can like give myself 20 lashes for every time I've done something wrong, or something didn't work out, or it failed. And if you have people around you saying, "Hey, good job, at least you tried." Oh yeah, good job, at least I tried. So I think self-compassion is a big one there.
Brilliant. Salmaan, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome speaking to you. And for all of you watching this, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please hit the like button underneath the video. And if you're intrigued to hear more around the topics of creativity and change and creative thinking, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to find out more about Salmaan, check out the show notes. You'll see the links to all of his socials, his website, and you can sign up for his newsletter there as well. Salmaan, it's been awesome chatting to you. Thanks so much for coming along.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the conversation, David.